this shouldn't be how a DPS spec is designed. My thoughts on Survival Hunter after playing it for a couple of weeks. The highest I've been clearing was 17s. I have a couple of 17s cleared, still a bunch that I've missed due to either not having the keys or just doing whatever keys were available or not playing it because I was playing something else. But it's around there and I feel very comfortable on 17s, could probably go even higher with my current hunter. I'm missing some enchants, but I've just done my first dungeon with my 415 weapon, 401 eye level, 4 set. I have Hunger of the Pack, I have my jewel signets. So all in all, the gear is good and the potential of the damage is there. Survival can do damage. Survival will probably start to really fall behind, I feel, judging by how it's progressing, judging by how I can put it side by side with my Boomy, Balancer's kind of skills with higher and higher keys. I can definitely see Survival doing poorer and poorer the higher the keys. The way that Survival works in Mythic Plus, and I can go a little bit into Raid as well, is that its cooldowns are decently strong. They're very difficult to play all at the same time because they kind of conflict with each other. You have a lot of little burst windows, and as long as the packs are either big enough or last very, very little, you can eventually do damage. But outside of cooldowns, if the pack lasts long enough and they're not coming back, you'll start to lose behind other people. In Raid, you want to be stuck to the boss with Spearhead. In Raid, you're going to be playing Spearhead and Coordinate Assault, and you should never use those at the same time. And this is where we're starting to get into some issues with Survival Hunter in terms of its overall cooldowns that you use. So from the first video that we've made, I've played it since I think I was leveling it at the time and I was trying all the talents. Now I have a more clear opinion of it. The problem with Survival is that it's counterintuitive. If I have to summarize it in like one big point, it's super counterintuitive. When I say counterintuitive, I mean that its resources and cooldowns don't work cohesively with themselves. So you have a lot of things to manage. You have focus, which you want to spend on a lot of abilities, mostly Mongoose Bite and Butchery, although explosive shots, serpent sting, stuff like this also eat up a bunch of focus, and that's part of what you want to use focus for. You also have bomb charges, and you have a lot of other mini cooldowns, also Butchery charges. You have Fury, you have Death Chakram, you have explosives, and you have Coordinate Assault, which are like 4 cooldowns. With the exception of Coordinate Assault, they're all mini cooldowns, and it's kind of hard to pop them all at the same time because they all do different things. For instance, Explosive Shot pops after a couple of seconds and eats focus, while Death Chakram gives you focus and debuffs targets to take extra damage from you. The problem with this is because what this means is that when you use Death Chakram, you kind of want to start with it, so you debuff everything so that it gets more damage from all of your cooldowns that you're popping at the start. However, that means that you're going to be losing the focus that is generating. If you don't want to lose the focus that is generating, that means you have to start with probably Explosive Shot and not have it buffed by Death Chakram, or Explosive Shot and then fire Death Chakram, and then start to consume focus with Butchery. But you're probably not going to use Butchery because you want to use bombs before you use Butchery. And that means that you'll probably end up capping focus by that time. So again, it's a little bit weird. And that means that you're going to hold off on playing Coordinate Assault, because once you do play Coordinate Assault, you first of all jump to the target, and during Coordinate Assault you want to use bombs and kill shots and maybe Mongoose Bite or a Butchery here and there. And this is where we go into the Coordinate Assault potential issue. It's a very fun cooldown, and what this does and how you want to play it is that your pet, when it attacks and uses its abilities like Claws, Bite, and all of that stuff, it will buff your next spell. Whether that it's a bomb or a kill shot, it depends, but it only buffs the next one. You want to spend those buffs with kill shot 100% of the time, because you're also going to get Birds of Prey, making kill shot cleave to 3 additional targets, so you're essentially executing 4 targets at once, which is really good and really cool, which means that you want to use that buff on kill shot. However, you first of all have to track the buff, so you know, plus kill shot is going to have a lesser cooldown. And if you consume the buff on bombs because you don't want the bombs to cap, you might not have the buff for kill shot. And if you hold your kill shot until you have the bomb, you will potentially lose at least 1 cast of kill shot during the Coordinate Assault window, because during the Coordinate Assault window, you'll be able to use kill shot no matter what the HP of the target is. So it's very, very pretentious. At the same time, if you're in AoE, maybe you want to shoot up a butchery here and there so you don't cap it, so that you use your tier set, but that will give you a lot of bombs. Are you going to spend all of your bomb charges? That means you're probably going to consume some of the buffs on bombs and not on kill shot. Or you're gonna cap on bombs, in which case why are you spending butchery stacks, in which case why do you even have a tier set? So all of these make it so that it's a little bit weird when you think of survival as to what you want to do. Essentially, the general idea is that you have to stop caring about certain things. You have to prioritize things differently, which is counterintuitive, because when you play a DPS like Fury Warrior, for instance, you want to generate rage, and as soon as you can use Rampage, you most of the time use Rampage, especially if you're not enraged. With survival, it's not as soon as it's available you want to use it, and you want to spend everything that you have as quickly as possible. You don't have the time to spend everything, so you kind of have to choose what you want to spend. Also, do you use Fury of the Eagle during, before, or after Coordinate Assault? Because this is a channeled ability, and while it's channeled, you don't spend any other abilities, you don't spend any focus, you don't generate any focus. Not to mention that in certain situations you will end up focus deprived, in which case stuff like terms of engagement become really useful, and flanking strike become really useful, because although they do some damage, they generate a lot of focus. So most of the time you want to use, for instance, flanking strike if you need focus instead of using kill command. Meaning that for a long time you probably won't use kill command at all. In which case, why do you have the spell even? And coming from a long time history of Survival Hunter being the spec that had Alpha Predator as the talent, giving you a second share of kill command, going to using kill command way more rarely, almost not at all in AoE, is very, very weird. So it ends up in this really convoluted spec that if you really try to figure it out, it just takes a long time, and you might just not be able to figure it out, and you're overthinking it, and you'll just get super frustrated. You just have to like kind of forget about it and just play it. And that's a little bit weird, because that's not how DPS works normally in WoW. That's not how performance works normally in WoW. Performance, you kind of want to optimize pretty much all aspects of your playstyle, right? And this is just part of its overall gameplay. Otherwise, it's fun. If I could have only Fury of the Eagle, or only Coordinate Assault, or only Spearhead, the gameplay would be less convoluted. It'll be a little bit more interesting, because there's a lot of stuff to do that keeps you busy. But since you have all of them, and if you're not pressing all of them very often, you're thinking that you're wasting damage, and you probably are. But if you are pressing all of them as quickly as you can, sometimes they conflict with each other and they mess each other up, which is weird, which is not something that other specs do. I've heard Shadow Priest might have some similar issues, but that's about it. And this is pretty much the way it functions. Outside of that, we can talk about the previous issues that we mentioned before, where Viper's Venom is just a weird talent that I dislike a lot. We have a lot of very, very, very poorly designed and boring talents. The 2 points to make Mongoose Bite deal 10% more damage. 2 points to make Mongoose Bite deal 10% more damage as well, but also Butchery deal 10% more damage as well. 4 points to get 20% more damage on Mongoose Bite, which is in single target, or 10% on Butchery. This is so weird and such a boring way to build a spec. Or 2 points to get 4 crit, which is usually what you might do in AoE, because there's no better talents to use those points on when you have extra stuff like lunge or more focus, which you don't need more focus, more stuff for kill command, which you don't need because you don't use kill command. Not to mention that aspect of the eagle is a major loss if you ever end up picking it. So all of this is weird. Not to mention ranger doesn't make a lot of sense because you're not using arcane shot or steady shot. So why is a spell, why is the talent buffing something that you don't need? Also 2-pointer. And maybe the most egregious example out of all of this is Ruthless Marauder. Ruthless Marauder is your capstone that you might think, oh, I really want this in dungeons. And hey, you might put 2 points into it. Some survival hunters put 2 points into it. But it's a 3-point capstone that is so unbalanced that you might think, oh, I could either put points into capstone or I could take 4% more crit. And you might be right or wrong 50% of the time in both cases, meaning that a capstone should not be competitive with 4% crit. It shouldn't. It should be a capstone. It should be like, oh my god, I'm picking this. This is so cool. So this is the problem with Ruthless Marauder, and you can look at it from everything that I've said so far and see what it does. Fury of the Eagle now gains bonus critical strike chance against targets below 35% health. Great. Okay, it has a little bit more execute damage, not to mention that it does pretty poor damage anyway for like a close to a capstone unless you're fighting like a lot of targets plus a soft cap at 5 targets. It's okay damage, but if you really look at the breakdown, Fury of the Eagle is around here. It's 6% more damage. Explosive Shot, which is a general talent for survival, does way more damage than Fury of the Eagle. And this is not just the best examples of explosive shot, this is just one of them. Not to mention Butchery does more damage than Fury of the Eagle. Fury of the Eagle being an ability or a capstone that hits AoE. That should do a lot more damage. And then you can take the Ruthless Marauder and have Fury of the Eagle also lower the cooldown of Wildfire Bomb and Flanking Strike. You're already holding Flanking Strike for a long time because you don't always need to cast it. You're already flooded on focus, plus you probably are spending your globals on something that does way more damage. Or you can have even more bomb charges to worry about capping because you're probably playing also Coordinate Assault because you're either spreading Serpent Stings or generating focus. So this is good if you don't pop anything else. This is good if you don't pop anything else. This shouldn't be how a DPS spec is designed. This is why I'm particularly disliking the way that survival is right now, because it has 4 or 5 different cool things that it does, but you cannot have all of them at the same time because it just feels weird and it feels like you're shooting yourself in the foot just to run faster with the other foot. It's just really, really, really weird. That's my thoughts on survival after playing it for a couple of weeks, after being able to do 17th and stuff like that. That's pretty much how it is. It can be one of the most fun melee specs of the game, maybe the most complicated and rewarding melee specs of the game, but it just isn't. You have to do all of this work, all of these juggling on so many different resources and things to master and to be aware of, and your reward is doing 20% less damage than actual meta specs, right? This is just one example. We can look at what was before. Algathar 17, also 20% behind the Rogue, Sapselian, Marcelian, another Ruby Life Pulse, also way behind Arms. And like, no matter what I do, obviously I'm not the best example for a survival hunter, but I have played survival for years and I've mained survival as well, so it's not too unfamiliar. I'm not too unfamiliar with the spec, and still struggling to maintain everything possible and put everything on cooldown. You will still barely reach the numbers that other spec do it just a lot more naturally and a lot easier with a lot less punishment to it, which is not what you want to feel like when you play one of the most complicated and convoluted rotations so far in the game. You can look at other specs like Boomy, Balance Druid, which also has a pretty high maintenance rotation and gameplay, but it does way better damage. Same with Shadow Priest. Shadow Priest is also probably one of the most complex range specs in the game, and it does massive damage. But survival doesn't do that. If I would do about 20 to 30% more damage, juggling 5 different things at once, then I would probably be okay with the rotation feeling very weird, because it actually has a payoff, because I'm actually working for a worthwhile result. But this is just not the current situation of survival. It can do damage. It probably has a much better single target than most specs doing Mythic Plus right now, but that's not enough to justify everything else that it has to do. And the way you build for single target is just through flat, boring 10%, 10%, 10% more damage, 10% more damage, a little bit more crit, and that's about it. Where other specs gain some cool interactions, some awesome procs, some nice synergies with the capstones. That's basically it. Rant over. God damn!
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.